The desperate arrangement. Jackson Harlow drummed his fingers against the polished mahogany desk, staring at the embossed invitation that had arrived that morning. The crisp white cardstock seemed to mock him with its elegant gold lettering. Celebrate. The engagement of Olivia Winthrop and Congressman Thomas Reed. He tossed it aside with a scoff. Problem, sir? His assistant Greta stood in the doorway of his office, her tablet clutched to her chest. Nothing I can't handle, Jackson replied, though the tightness in his jaw suggested otherwise. As the founder of Harlow Innovations, he'd transformed a garage startup into a tech empire valued at billions. Yet here he was, unnerved by a simple party invitation. Olivia had been his partner for 3 years before she'd left him for someone with political aspirations 6 months ago. Now she was flaunting her new engagement at what would undoubtedly be the social event of the season, and Jackson couldn't bear the thought of attending alone. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," he said suddenly, "and get me Diane from the PR department." Within the hour, Diane sat across from him, confusion evident on her face as Jackson outlined his unusual request. "You want to hire someone to pretend to be your girlfriend?" she repeated, eyebrows raised. "For one night only," Jackson clarified. "The Winthrop Reed engagement party. I need someone convincing, sophisticated, intelligent, capable of holding her own in a room full of San Francisco's elite." Diane hesitated. "This isn't exactly standard PR practice, Mr. Harlow." "That's why I'm willing to pay a premium," he countered. "Find me someone by the end of the week. Someone who won't embarrass me or worse, sell this story to the tabloids. Afterward." After Diane left, Jackson wondered if he'd made a mistake. But the alternative, showing up alone and enduring pitying glances from his peers, was unthinkable. 3 days later, Valentina Reed sat in a modest coffee shop, checking her watch every few minutes. The email had been vague, a unique acting opportunity with an influential client. Normally, she would have dismissed it as suspicious, but the reference had come through her former drama professor, someone she trusted implicitly. At 28, Valentina's acting career hadn't taken off as she'd hoped. She supplemented occasional theater roles with tutoring literature at the community college, barely making enough to cover rent for her tiny apartment and the medical bills that had accumulated during her father's final illness last year. When a sharply dressed woman in her 40s approached her table, Valentina straightened her posture and extended her hand. "Valentina Reed?" "Yes, that's me. You must be Diane." "I appreciate your discretion," Diane said, sliding into the seat across from her. "My client is looking for someone with your particular skill set for a rather unconventional role." Valentina listened as Diane outlined the proposal. Portray the girlfriend of a prominent businessman for one evening, attend a high-profile social event, and convince everyone they were a legitimate couple. The pay was substantial, enough to clear her remaining debt and give her breathing room for months. "May I ask who the client is?" Valentina inquired. "Jackson Harlow." Valentina nearly choked on her coffee. Everyone knew Harlow Innovations and its notoriously private founder. "I'd need to meet him first," she said carefully, "to see if we have any chemistry. Even staged chemistry requires some compatibility." Diane seemed pleased with her response. "He'll want to meet you too. Are you available tomorrow morning?" The next day, Valentina found herself in the imposing Harlow Innovations headquarters downtown. Jackson Harlow was taller than she expected, with sharp features and calculating gray eyes that assessed her immediately. "So, you're the actress," he said, offering a perfunctory handshake. "And you're the businessman who needs one," she replied evenly, maintaining eye contact. A hint of amusement flickered across his face. "Diane tells me you have experience with improvisation." "I do. It comes in handy when the script isn't working." They spent the next hour discussing expectations, boundaries, and their fabricated backstory. They'd supposedly met at a charity function for arts education, a passion they would claim to share. Jackson was precise about every detail, from how she should dress to topics she should avoid. The party is in 2 weeks, he concluded. We'll need at least 2 more meetings to rehearse our story. Diane will arrange everything. As Valentina gathered her things to leave, Jackson added, "One more thing, Ms. Reed. This arrangement stays between us. I'm having a contract drawn up with a substantial non-disclosure clause." Valentina paused at the door. "Mr. Harlow, I understand discretion, but just so we're clear, you're not just hiring an actress. You're hiring a human being." "I'll play my part perfectly, but I won't be treated like a prop." For the first time, Jackson looked at her with something other than clinical assessment. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough, Ms. Reed. I'll see you next week." As she left the building, Valentina wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The money would solve her immediate problems, but pretending to be in love with a man who calculated every interaction like a business transaction. That might require the performance of a lifetime. Part 2. Unexpected Chemistry. The Grand Sutton Hotel's ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the shimmer of designer gowns. Jackson straightened his bow tie in the reflection of his phone screen as the limousine approached the entrance. "Remember," he said to Valentina beside him, "Olivia will try to make you feel inferior. She excels at subtle put-downs disguised as compliments." Valentina smoothed the midnight blue silk of her gown, a rental that fit her as if it had been made for her. "I grew up with 3 older sisters, Mr. Harlow. I'm well versed in that particular art form." "Jackson," he corrected. "We've been dating for 4 months, remember?" She smiled, the practiced one they'd rehearsed. "Of course, darling." Their preparation had been thorough, 3 additional meetings where they'd memorized details about each other's lives, or rather the versions they'd created. Jackson was surprised by Valentina's dedication, how she'd researched his company and industry enough to hold convincing conversations. The car door opened, and cameras flashed immediately. The Winthrop Reed engagement was a significant social event, with Olivia's family connections to old money and Thomas's rising political star. Jackson placed his hand at the small of Valentina's back as they walked the short red carpet. He felt her momentary tension before she relaxed into his touch, leaning slightly against him in a gesture that appeared affectionate to onlookers. "Jackson Harlow," a reporter stepped forward. "Who's your lovely date?" Before Jackson could answer, Valentina extended her hand with a warm smile. "Valentina Reed, pleasure to meet you." "How did you two meet?" Jackson began their rehearsed response, but Valentina interjected with a laugh. "He's too modest. He outbid everyone at a charity auction for arts education, all to fund a theater program for disadvantaged youth where I volunteer. I thought he was just another wealthy man assuaging his conscience until he showed up the next week to help build the sets." Jackson blinked, momentarily caught off guard by this embellishment to their story. But the reporter was captivated, scribbling notes eagerly. "You build theater sets, Mr. Harlow?" "I'm handy with tools," Jackson replied, going along with it. "My grandfather was a carpenter." This was actually true, one of the few personal details he'd shared during their preparation. Valentina had been listening more carefully than he'd realized. Inside, the ballroom was already crowded. Jackson scanned the room, immediately locating Olivia in a striking red gown, her arm linked with Thomas Reed's as they greeted guests. "There she is," he murmured. "She's beautiful," Valentina observed. "But she keeps checking to see who's watching her. Interesting." Jackson raised an eyebrow, impressed by her perception. Before he could respond, a waiter offered champagne, and they each took a glass. "To convincing performances," Valentina whispered, clinking her glass against his. The first hour passed smoothly. Jackson introduced Valentina to various business associates, surprised at how effortlessly she engaged them. She asked thoughtful questions about sustainable technology when meeting his head of R&D, discussed recent market trends with investors, and charmed his most difficult client with genuine interest in his sailing hobby. "Where did you learn about semiconductor development?" Jackson asked quietly as they moved between groups. "I read the briefing materials you provided," she replied. "And I've always been curious about everything. My father was an engineer. It rubbed off. This wasn't in her file." Jackson realized how little he actually knew about the woman beside him. Eventually, the moment he'd been dreading arrived. Olivia approached, dragging Thomas along, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Jackson, I'm so glad you could make it." Her gaze slid to Valentina, assessing the competition. "And you brought a friend." "Girlfriend, actually," Jackson corrected, slipping his arm around Valentina's waist. "Valentina, this is Olivia Winthrop and her fiancé, Congressman Reed." "Congratulations on your engagement," Valentina said warmly. "What a beautiful event you've created." "Thank you," Olivia replied, her tone suggesting she was speaking to a child. "It must be quite overwhelming for you, all these important people in one room." Jackson felt Valentina stiffen slightly beside him. "Actually," Valentina said with a gentle smile, "I find that people are just people, regardless of their net worth or influence. Some of the most fascinating conversations I've had were with my students at the community center." Thomas Reed perked up at this. "You work in education?" "Among other things," Valentina replied. "I believe in the transformative power of arts education, particularly for underprivileged youth." "That's one of my platform positions," Thomas said, suddenly engaged. "We should talk about this more. The campaign is looking for authentic community, initiatives to support." Olivia's smile tightened as her fiancé focused entirely on Valentina. "Darling, we should greet the Morgans. They just arrived." "In a moment," Thomas replied, still looking at Valentina. "Ms. Reed, would you mind if I contacted you about potentially speaking at our education forum next month?" Jackson watched in astonishment as Valentina handled the situation with perfect grace, exchanging contact information with the congressman while keeping the conversation inclusive enough that Olivia couldn't reasonably object. As the couple finally moved on, Jackson leaned closer to Valentina. "That was masterful." "I didn't intend to steal her thunder," Valentina whispered back, "but I don't appreciate condescension." "No, you certainly put her in her place." He found himself genuinely smiling for the first time that evening. "I think I need something stronger than champagne after that. Scotch? Please." At the bar, Jackson caught several people watching Valentina appreciatively. She stood near a massive floral arrangement, chatting animatedly with an elderly woman he recognized as a major philanthropist. There was something magnetic about her, an authenticity that stood out in a room full of carefully constructed personas. When he returned with their drinks, the elderly woman patted his arm. "Your Valentina is delightful, Jackson. Where have you been hiding her?" "I've been wondering that myself," he replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. Later, as the orchestra began playing and couples moved to the dance floor, Jackson hesitated. Dancing hadn't been part of their arrangement. "We don't have to," Valentina said, reading his expression. "Can you dance?" "Reasonably well." "You?" "I've been told I'm adequate." She laughed, a real laugh, not the practiced one, and the sound did something unexpected to his chest. "That's the least confident thing I've heard you say all night." Jackson found himself extending his hand. "Shall we be adequate together, then?" On the dance floor, her hand felt small in his, her waist delicate beneath his palm. They moved together with surprising ease. "Everyone is watching us," she murmured. "They're watching you," he corrected. "You've managed to captivate the entire room." Valentina looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "That was the assignment, wasn't it?" "Yes," Jackson admitted. "But not like this. Not by being genuinely—" He trailed off, unable to articulate exactly what made her different. "Genuinely. What?" she prompted. "Yourself," he finally said. "I think that's what's working. You're not acting at all, are you?" Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Jackson thought he glimpsed something vulnerable behind her composed exterior. But before she could answer, the music ended, and they were swept into another conversation with guests. By the end of the evening, as they retreated to the limousine, Jackson realized something had shifted. The woman beside him was no longer simply an actress he'd hired. She had become, in the space of one evening, something he hadn't anticipated. A person he genuinely wanted to know better. "You exceeded all expectations," he said as the car pulled away from the hotel. Valentina slipped off her heels with a small sigh of relief. "Thank you. Does this mean our arrangement is complete?" Jackson hesitated. The original plan had been for this one event only, but he found himself reluctant to end their association so abruptly. "Actually," he said slowly, "I was wondering if you might consider extending our arrangement. There's a tech conference in 2 weeks where having you as my +1 would be advantageous." "Advantageous," she repeated, the word hanging between them with a weight neither had anticipated. "Professionally speaking," he clarified, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. Valentina studied him for a long moment, before her lips curved into a smile that made his heart beat a little faster. "I'll check my schedule," she said, "but I think that could be arranged." Walls crumbling. 3 weeks after the engagement party, Valentina stood on the balcony of Jackson's penthouse apartment, gazing at the San Francisco skyline. The tech conference had come and gone, followed by a charity auction, a business dinner, and now this, a private gathering of Jackson's closest associates. What had begun as a one-night arrangement had somehow evolved into a recurring role. "Beautiful view," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Jackson approaching with 2 glasses of wine. "I was just thinking the same thing," she replied, accepting the offered glass. "Your friends seem nice." "They're impressed by you," Jackson said, "especially Benjamin. He's never seen me with someone who can challenge his views on architectural preservation so eloquently." Valentina smiled. "I wrote my thesis on urban renewal versus historical conservation. It's a passion of mine." Another hidden talent. Jackson leaned against the railing. "You're full of those." Inside, 8 of Jackson's closest friends and business partners were enjoying dinner and conversation. This evening felt different from their previous public appearances, more intimate, less performative. Yet Valentina found herself maintaining the role with practiced ease. "You didn't need to invite me tonight," she said quietly. "This isn't a high-profile event where you need to maintain appearances." Jackson swirled the wine in his glass, not meeting her eyes. "Maybe I wanted you here." The simple admission hung between them, charged with unspoken questions. "Jackson," called Benjamin from inside, "we're debating the Anderson proposal. We need your input." "Duty calls," Jackson said, straightening. Before he moved away, he hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind Valentina's ear. The gesture was so natural, so unplanned, that it startled them both. Later that night, after the guests had departed, Valentina helped Jackson clear glasses from the living room. "You don't have to do that," he protested. "The cleaning service. We'll handle it tomorrow." "I don't mind." She stacked plates carefully. "It feels normal, and normal is in short supply these days." Jackson paused, watching her. "What do you mean?" She set down the dishes and faced him directly. "This arrangement, it's becoming complicated, isn't it?" "Is it?" His voice was carefully neutral. "You know it is." Valentina took a deep breath. "We've been seeing each other 3 or 4 times a week for nearly a month. You've introduced me to your friends. Yesterday, your assistant called to ask about my food preferences for tonight without prompting from you." "Greta is efficient," Jackson said, deflecting. "That's not the point." Valentina moved closer. "What are we doing, Jackson? Really?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "I don't know." The honesty in his voice surprised her. Jackson Harlow, the man who planned everything meticulously, who had contingencies for his contingencies, didn't know. "You're still paying me," she said, softly. "But it doesn't feel like a job anymore." "Do you want me to stop? The payments, I mean." Valentina thought of her recently paid-off medical bills, the security deposit she'd just put down on a better apartment. "I can't afford to say yes to that question." "That's not what I asked." Their eyes met, and Valentina felt the careful boundaries she'd established beginning to crumble. "I should go," she said, reaching for her purse. Jackson didn't stop her, but as she reached the door, he called her name. "Valentina," she turned. "I have that fundraiser for the Children's Hospital on Saturday. Will you come? Not as whatever this is, but as my guest." "Is there a difference?" "I think there could be." She nodded once and left, her thoughts tumbling over each other as the elevator descended. This wasn't supposed to happen. Professional actors didn't confuse the role with reality. Yet somewhere between the rehearsed smiles and practiced touches, something genuine had taken root. The next morning, Valentina was reviewing applications from potential theater students when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Valentina. Reed speaking." "Ms. Reed, this is Penelope Shaw from the San Francisco Chronicle." Valentina's stomach dropped. "Yes?" "I'm writing a profile on Jackson Harlow, focusing on his personal transformation over the past month. Several sources mention you as the catalyst for this change. I was hoping to schedule an interview." "I'm sorry, but I don't give interviews about my personal life," Valentina replied carefully. "Understandable. But I should mention that we're running the piece with or without your input. We have some interesting information about the origins of your relationship with Mr. Harlow." Ice spread through Valentina's veins. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say a source close to Harlow Innovations has provided documentation suggesting your relationship began as a business arrangement." Valentina's mind raced. The NDA she'd signed would protect Jackson legally, but the court of public opinion wouldn't be so forgiving. His reputation, and hers, would be tarnished if this story broke. "I need to decline comment," she said finally. "Goodbye, Ms. Shaw." She immediately called Jackson, but reached his voicemail. Next, she tried Diane, who answered on the second ring. "We have a problem," Valentina explained. "The Chronicle knows about our arrangement." Diane was silent for a moment. "Come to the office, now." An hour later, Valentina sat in a conference room with Diane and Jackson's legal team. Jackson himself burst through the door, his expression thunderous. "Who talked?" he demanded. "Who broke the NDA?" "We're investigating," said the head lawyer, a stern woman named Rita. "But we need to decide on our approach immediately. The story runs tomorrow." "Can we stop it?" Jackson asked. Rita shook her head. "Not without drawing more attention. We need a strategy." All eyes turned to Valentina, who had been silent throughout the exchange. She met Jackson's gaze directly. "What if we tell the truth?" she suggested. "Absolutely not," Diane objected. "It would be catastrophic for Jackson's image." "Not the whole truth," Valentina clarified, "but a version of it. Yes, we met through unusual circumstances, a mutually beneficial arrangement. But over time, it evolved into something more genuine. That's not even a lie, is it?" The question was directed at Jackson, whose expression had softened slightly. "It's not," he admitted quietly. Rita considered this. It could work. A modern meet-cute with a twist. We control the narrative instead of becoming victims of it. "I'd need to give an interview," Valentina said. "Both of us would. Together." Jackson nodded slowly. "Set it up." As the lawyers and PR team dispersed to make arrangements, Jackson and Valentina found themselves alone in the conference room. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is exactly what you didn't want. Public scrutiny, your privacy invaded. It's not your fault. It is. I created this situation." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "And now I'm asking you to lie again. This time to the entire city." Valentina stood and moved to his side. Is it a lie, Jackson? Is that all this is to you? He looked at her, conflict evident in his eyes. You know it's not. Then tell me what it is. Not what you think I want to hear. Not what looks good for the press. The truth. Jackson reached for her hand, his touch tentative. I don't know when. It changed. When you became more than a convenient solution to a problem. But somewhere between your laugh during that first dance and watching you debate historical preservation with Benjamin, I stopped pretending. Valentina's breath caught. So did I. The admission hung between them, fragile and new. But, she continued, we can't build something real on a foundation of deception. Not with the press watching our every move, not with money still changing hands. Then we stop the payments, Jackson said immediately. We come clean to the press, at least partially, and we... He hesitated. We start over. Properly. Just like that? No, he admitted. It won't be simple. People will talk, speculate. Some will never believe us, but I'm willing to weather that if you are. Valentina studied him, seeing not the calculated businessman who had hired her, but a man standing vulnerable before her, walls crumbling. I need time to think, she said finally. This affects my reputation too. My teaching career, my acting prospects. Jackson nodded, disappointment flashing across his features before he composed himself. Of course. Take whatever time you need. As she gathered her things to leave, Jackson called after her once more. Valentina? Regardless of what you decide about us, I want you to know that meeting you has changed me. For the better, I think. She smiled softly. I think it's changed both of us. Outside the Harlow Innovations building, Valentina paused, on the sidewalk, looking up at the towering glass structure that housed Jackson's empire. Whatever decision she made would alter the course of her life irrevocably. The safe choice would be to walk away, to return to the struggling but simple existence she'd known before. But as she hailed a taxi, Valentina realized that simple didn't necessarily mean better. And sometimes, the most authentic performances weren't performances at all. Truth and consequences. The interview room at the Chronicle felt smaller than Valentina had imagined. Penelope Shaw sat across from them, recorder placed precisely between them on the polished table. Jackson's knee pressed against Valentina's under the table, a silent reassurance. Thank you both for agreeing to this, Penelope began, her smile professional but eyes shrewd. Let's start with the obvious question. How did you two really meet? Jackson glanced at Valentina, then leaned forward. The truth is more complicated than most romantic stories. We met through a mutual connection, Valentina continued, sticking to their agreed-upon version. I was looking for opportunities in event hosting, and Jackson needed someone comfortable in social settings to accompany him to functions. So, it was a business arrangement initially? Penelope pressed. A professional introduction, Jackson corrected. But yes, our first interactions were more structured than typical dating. Penelope's eyebrow arched. My sources suggest Ms. Reed was explicitly hired to pose as your girlfriend for the Winthrop Reed engagement party. For a considerable sum. Valentina felt Jackson tense beside her. This was the moment they'd prepared for. That's an oversimplification, Valentina said, her voice steady. I was compensated for event attendance, yes. Many socialites and influencers are. But what developed between us wasn't in any contract. And what exactly has developed? Penelope asked, her pen poised. Jackson surprised both women by reaching for Valentina's hand. Something neither of us expected. Something real. The interview continued for another hour. A delicate dance of partial truths and genuine emotion. By the end, even Penelope seemed affected by their story. One last question, she said, clicking off her recorder. Off the record. Do you really expect people to believe this? Valentina met her gaze directly. We can't control what people believe. We can only be honest about where we are now. Outside the Chronicle building, their momentary unity fractured. That went as well as could be expected, Jackson said, checking his watch. I have a board meeting in an hour. So we're done here? Valentina asked, suddenly unsure where they stood. Jackson hesitated. Dinner tonight, my place? I can't. I have theater rehearsal. We're doing outreach performances at local schools next month. Right, Jackson said, disappointment flickering across his features. Tomorrow, then. As his driver pulled up, Valentina touched his arm. Jackson, what are we doing? Really? Damage control, he replied automatically, then seeing her expression, softened. And figuring us out, if there is an us. Is that what you want? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed insistently. I have to take this. We'll talk tomorrow. Valentina watched him slide into the sleek black car, phone already at his ear, and wondered if they were being honest with the press or with themselves. The next morning, Valentina's phone exploded with notifications. The Chronicle article had dropped with the headline, From Business to Pleasure, the Unconventional Romance of Tech Titan Jackson Harlow. The piece was surprisingly sympathetic, painting their story as a modern romance born from unconventional beginnings. Penelope had framed it as a refreshing departure from dating app culture. Two people whose professional arrangement had blossomed into genuine connection. But the comments section told a different story. Gold digger, read one. PR stunt, claimed another. She's playing him like a fiddle, a particularly vicious one suggested. Her phone rang, Congressman Reed's office. The education forum they'd discussed at the engagement party was scheduled for next week, and they still wanted her to speak. But there was an awkward hesitation in the aide's voice. In light of recent revelations, the congressman wanted to confirm your expertise in arts education. I have a master's degree in performance studies with a focus on educational outreach, Valentina replied coolly. My credentials haven't changed since we last spoke. After hanging up, she noticed a text from Jackson. Dinner tonight? Need to talk. That evening, Valentina arrived at Jackson's penthouse to find him pacing, tablet in hand. Have you seen what they're saying? He demanded without preamble. The board is concerned about public perception. Investors are asking questions. Hello to you too, Valentina said, setting down her purse. Yes, I've seen the comments. I've also had my qualifications questioned, and 3 potential acting gigs suddenly become unavailable. Jackson stopped pacing. I'm sorry, I didn't think... That's been the problem from the beginning, hasn't it? Valentina interrupted. You didn't. Think about the consequences for me. I was a solution to your problem, and now I'm collateral damage. That's not fair, Jackson protested. I didn't force you into this arrangement. No, but you had much less to lose. You're Jackson Harlow. Your reputation might take a hit, but you'll always be the brilliant founder of Harlow Innovations. I'm just the actress who faked a relationship for money. Do you know what that does to my credibility? To my career prospects? Jackson's expression shifted from defensive to concerned. What can I do? How can I fix this? That's just it, Valentina said, her voice softening. Not everything can be fixed with money or influence. Some things just have to be weathered. Jackson moved closer, reaching for her hands. Then let's weather it together. Is that what you want? Really? Because sometimes I think what you want is the perfect girlfriend who makes you look good at events and challenges your friends intellectually, and never asks for more than you're willing to give. That's not true, Jackson insisted, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. Isn't it? You've built walls around yourself so high that I wonder if anyone has ever truly seen the real Jackson Harlow, including me. He dropped her hands and turned away, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city below. My parents died when I was 17, he said, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear. Car accident. I built this company from nothing because I had nothing else. No family, no safety net. Valentina remained silent, recognizing the rarity of this disclosure. Success became my identity, he continued. I dated Olivia because she fit the image of the partner a man in my position should have. When she left, it wasn't just heartbreak, it was another failure, another rejection. Is that what I was? Valentina asked softly. A way to avoid failure? Jackson turned back to her, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. At first, yes. But then you became the first person in years who made me feel like more than my achievements, who made me want to be more. The confession hung between them, raw and honest, in a way their practiced lines for the press had never been. I don't know if I can do this, Jackson, Valentina admitted. Navigate this public scrutiny, figure out what's real between us while the whole world watches and judges. I understand, he said, though pain flashed in his eyes. I wouldn't blame you for walking away. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. I need time, Valentina finally said. Space to figure out what I want, separate from all this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing the luxury apartment, the newspaper article, the complicated situation they'd created. Jackson nodded slowly. How much time? I don't know. The education forum is next week. After that, I'm taking a teaching residency in Los Angeles for a month. It was confirmed before all this happened. A month, Jackson repeated, as if testing how the separation would feel. It's probably for the best, Valentina said. Let the media circus die down. Give us both space to think. And after the month, she met his gaze directly. I don't know, Jackson. That depends on what we both decide we truly want. As she gathered her things to leave, Jackson moved to the kitchen and returned with a small package. I got you something, he said, extending it toward her. Before all this happened, for the education forum. Valentina unwrapped it cautiously, to find a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant. A perfect miniature of a theater mask. I remembered you mentioned your first role was in a community theater production of A Midsummer Night's Dream when you were 12, Jackson explained. I thought, it's beautiful, Valentina whispered, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift, proof that he had been listening, that he had cared enough to remember such a small detail. May I? He asked, gesturing to the necklace. She turned, lifting her hair as he fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin. When she faced him again, they were standing closer than either had intended. I'm not good at this, Jackson admitted, at being vulnerable, at risking failure, but I think you might be worth that risk. Valentina's hand rose to touch, the pendant at her throat. We both have thinking to do. No promises, no expectations. He nodded, respecting her boundaries even as his eyes betrayed his hope. At the door, Valentina paused. Whatever happens, Jackson, I want you to know that none of this was fake for me. Not for a while now. As she left the penthouse, stepping into the cool evening air, Valentina felt both heavier and lighter. The path forward was unclear, complicated by public opinion and private doubts. But for the first time since this began, she was making choices based on what she wanted, not what she was being paid to be. The necklace lay against her skin, a tangible reminder of unexpected connections formed in the most unlikely circumstances. A month apart would tell them both whether what they'd found was worth fighting for, or if some performances, no matter how convincing, were better left on the stage. Beyond pretense, the Los Angeles sun beat down on Valentina as she guided a group of enthusiastic teenagers through an improvisation exercise. Remember, she called over their laughter, the goal isn't to be funny, it's to be truthful in imaginary circumstances. Like pretending to be someone's girlfriend, quipped a girl in the back row. Valentina froze momentarily. 3 weeks into Dati, her teaching residency, and still the story followed her. She recovered quickly, offering a measured smile. Sometimes life imitates art in unexpected ways. Now let's continue with the exercise. Later, alone in her temporary apartment, Valentina scrolled through her phone. No messages from Jackson in 5 days. Their communication had been sporadic during her time in Los Angeles. Tentative texts about their days, careful not to push or presume. The education forum had gone well, despite the whispers and sideways glances. Congressman Reed had been professional, introducing her based on her qualifications rather than her connection to Jackson. Jackson had attended, sitting quietly in the back, a silent supporter. They'd shared dinner afterward, a public meal at a restaurant where they could be seen together, but wouldn't be overheard. The media's losing interest, he'd told her. Something about a celebrity divorce has them distracted. Good, she'd replied. Though part of me wonders if we should be disappointed that our great romance isn't headline-worthy anymore. He'd laughed, a genuine sound that had become more frequent in their interactions. I prefer our private story to their public version anyway. That had been their last in-person conversation before her departure for Los Angeles. The distance had been clarifying in some ways, confusing in others. Without Jackson's physical presence, without the trappings of his wealth and position constantly surrounding her, Valentina had been able to examine her feelings more objectively. She missed him. Not the lifestyle, not the excitement, but him. His dry humor, his intense focus when she spoke, the rare moments when he allowed his carefully constructed facade to slip. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Probably the neighbor returning the book she'd lent him. Valentina opened the door without checking and froze. Jackson stood in the hallway looking less polished than usual in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, a small duffel bag at his feet. "Hi," he said, uncertainty in his voice. "Jackson? What are you doing here?" "I was in town for a meeting," he explained, then amended. "No, that's not true. I scheduled a meeting as an excuse to be in town. May I come in?" Valentina stepped aside, acutely aware of her small temporary apartment with its mismatched furniture and faded carpet, a stark contrast to his penthouse. Jackson didn't seem to notice, his attention fixed entirely on her. "Your hair is different," he observed. Valentina touched the ends of her hair, recently cut to shoulder length. "The heat," she explained. "It's easier this way." "It suits you." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unsaid things. "How's the teaching going?" he finally asked. "Good. The students are amazing. Challenging but rewarding." She gestured to the small kitchen area. "Would you like something to drink? I have water, coffee, or mediocre wine." "Water is fine." As she filled a glass, Valentina tried to compose herself. She'd imagined their reunion, but not like this. Not with him appearing unannounced at her door when she was wearing worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, her face free of makeup. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," Jackson said, accepting the water but not drinking it. The thought crossed my mind. "The month is almost up," he pointed out. "I know we said we'd take this. Time to think, to decide what we want." "I've done that thinking, Valentina. I know what I want." Her heart quickened. "And what's that?" "You," he said simply. "Not as an arrangement, not as an actress playing a part. Just you, however you are, whatever that means for us." Valentina set down her own glass carefully. "It's not that simple, Jackson." "Why not?" "Because our whole relationship began as a lie. Because we come from completely different worlds. Because your life is in San Francisco and mine is, well, wherever the next opportunity takes me." Jackson moved closer, setting his untouched water aside. "Those are logistics. Challenges, yes, but not insurmountable ones. What I'm asking is whether you feel something real for me, Something worth building on. Valentina met his gaze. I do. That's what makes this so complicated. Or so simple, he countered. Everything else can be figured out if we both want the same thing. And what is that, exactly? What are you proposing, Jackson? He smiled slightly at her choice of words. Not a marriage proposal, not yet. I'm proposing honesty, a real relationship. No contracts, no payments, no pretending to be something we're not. You make it sound easy. It won't be, he acknowledged. The public scrutiny has died down, but it hasn't disappeared. There will be people who never believe our relationship is genuine. Your career will still face challenges because of your connection to me. My board still has concerns about my personal life affecting the company. You're not selling this very well, Valentina said, but there was a hint of a smile on her lips. I'm being honest. That's the foundation I want to build on. He reached for her hands. I've spent my entire adult life constructing a perfect image, surrounding myself with people who reinforce that image. Then you came along and made me realize how empty that perfection was. Valentina squeezed his hands. I'm far from perfect, Jackson. That's exactly the point. You're real. You showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that connections built on authenticity are stronger than any business arrangement. His words resonated with Valentina. During their time apart, she'd realized that what she valued most about their complicated relationship was precisely those moments when the pretense fell away, when they were simply two people discovering each other. What about your company? She asked. Your board's concerns? I've made changes, Jackson said. Delegated more, established better work-life boundaries. I realized I've been hiding behind my work, using success as a shield against genuine connection. I don't want to do that anymore. And what about my career? My independence? Whatever you want to pursue, I support it. Teaching, acting, both, neither. It's your choice. All I ask is that we face these decisions together. He paused, his expression earnest. I'm not asking you to fit into my world, Valentina. I'm asking if we can create a new one together. Valentina studied him, seeing not the confident CEO who had hired her months ago, but a man standing before her without pretense or protection. I need to finish my teaching commitment here, she said finally. 2 more weeks. Jackson's face fell slightly. I understand. But, she continued, there's a small theater company in San Francisco that's been trying to recruit me for their outreach program. I was hesitant before, but now... Hope flickered in his eyes. Now? Now I'm thinking it might be worth exploring. The smile that spread across Jackson's face was unlike any she'd seen before. Unguarded, genuine joy. Does that mean... It means I'm willing to try, Valentina clarified. No guarantees, no performance. Just us, figuring it out together. Jackson pulled her gently into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, reassuring. There's something else you should know, he murmured into her hair. I've decided to establish a foundation for arts education in underserved communities. The board has already approved the initial funding. Valentina leaned back to look at his face. Jackson, you didn't have to do that for me. I didn't, he replied. I did it because of you. Because you showed me the value of the arts in education, how it changes lives. It's something I believe in now, too. The realization washed over her. He had been listening all along, not just to create a convincing backstory, but because he genuinely cared about her passions and perspectives. Stay for dinner? She asked, gesturing around her modest apartment. I can't offer much, probably just pasta and that mediocre wine. Sounds perfect, Jackson replied, and she believed him. Later, as they sat at her small kitchen table, Jackson sharing stories about his childhood that he'd never told anyone, Valentina realized that this unpolished, authentic moment was more valuable than all the glittering parties and business functions they'd attended together. "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That we've come full circle," she replied. "We started with a performance designed to convince others, and now we're here, convincing only ourselves." "And are you convinced?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his question. Valentina reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "I'm getting there, one real moment at a time." Outside, the Los Angeles sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. Through the open window came the sounds of the city: cars, honking, people laughing, music playing from a nearby apartment, life messy and unscripted and beautiful. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. "I used to think I had everything figured out: success, status, security, but I was missing something essential." "What's that?" "Authenticity," he said simply. "The courage to be seen as I really am, flaws and all." "It is courageous," Valentina agreed. "Terrifying, actually." "Worth it, though," Jackson said, his eyes never leaving hers. "At least I think so." As the evening deepened into night, they talked about practical matters: her apartment in San Francisco, the theater company's offer, how they would navigate their relationship in the public eye. But underlying every discussion was an understanding that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them without pretense or performance. 3 months later, Valentina stood backstage at a community theater in one of San Francisco's historically underserved neighborhoods. Through the curtain, she could hear the excited murmurs of children and parents waiting for the performance to begin, the culmination of the outreach program she now directed. "Nervous?" asked a familiar voice behind her. She turned to find Jackson, sleeves rolled up, paint smudges on his hands from helping with the set construction. "A little," she admitted. "It's our first major production." "They'll love it," he assured her. "You've worked miracles with these kids." From the stage came the voice of a young girl, one of Valentina's most promising students, announcing the beginning of the show. The audience applauded, and Valentina felt a surge of pride. "I should check on the props," she said, starting to move away. Jackson caught her hand, pulling her back for a quick kiss. "Break a leg. I'll be in the front row." As she watched him slip through the side door to take his seat, Valentina touched the theater mask pendant that still hung around her neck. So much had changed since he'd given it to her. Her career had found new purpose. His company had expanded its community, initiatives, and together they had built something neither could have anticipated when they'd entered into their original arrangement. There were still skeptics, still occasional tabloid stories questioning the authenticity of their relationship, but those voices had faded into background noise, irrelevant to the life they were creating together. The stage manager gave Valentina a thumbs up. Everything was ready. As the curtain began to rise, revealing her students poised to begin their performance, Valentina thought about the strange, winding path that had brought her here. What had begun as a desperate financial decision, a performance for show, had transformed into the most authentic connection of her life. Some might call it ironic that an actress had found her truest self through a fake relationship. But Valentina knew the truth. Sometimes the roles we play reveal who we really are, and sometimes the most convincing performances aren't performances at all. As the young actors delivered their first lines, Valentina caught Jackson's eye in the audience. He smiled. That private smile meant only for her, and she knew that whatever roles life might ask them to play in the future, they would face them together. No scripts, no pretense, just two people who had found something real in the most unexpected circumstances.